am Frances Callier.
And I'm Angela V. Shelton.
And we're Frangela.
You know what you need in your life? The Final Word podcast.
Yes, you do.
That's right. It is the final word on all things political and pop cultural.
Where we make real news real funny.
Where we inspire you so you can #resist.
Subscribe and get a new episode of the Final Word podcast each week. It's the news we think you need to hear.
That's right. We think you need to hear it. Okay?
Yeah, it's what we say so.
That's right. And because all we do is give, every Thursday you can listen to our hysterical podcast, Idiot of the Week.
We round up the stupid because you know what? Somebody has to.
Okay. All we do is give.
I'm Brian Karam, and I've spent decades covering politics. Now I'm taking you behind the scenes, one interview at a time.
Join us as each week Brian confronts the issues that matter, posing the questions you wish you could ask. No filter, no agenda, just the truth.
We're not here for sound bites. We're here for substance. Join me, Brian Karam, every week as we cut through the noise and get straight to it. This is Just Ask the Question, where curiosity will lead us to the facts.
Subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform, and remember, when you want answers, all you have to do is just ask the question.
Our press secretary gave alternative facts to that.
My goal in this deposition was to be truthful, but not particularly helpful.
Welcome to Unspun, the podcast that makes you better at finding the truth. The way people get news is changing. It used to be that there were many reporters who would research stories and write articles, but now politicians and famous people share information directly with you on social media and the internet. That means you find out things fast, but it's up to you to make sure the information's actually accurate. And newsmakers don't always do their part. The temptation to manipulate information is strong. They bend the truth to deceive so that they can avoid accountability, so that they can advance their agendas. When you recognize these agendas, you can sometimes find out what's real. And we're at a crossroads where anyone can share anything online, so it's important to sharpen your critical thinking skills. Finding that deception before it goes viral is pretty much a survival skill now, and we're going to do it together. Let's get unspun. Hi, Truth Seekers. It's time for episode 4 of the Unspun Journal Club. In these mini episodes, I'm breaking down newer research on journalism and information. And today I've got a study that, honestly, I found kind of exciting. It's looking at a concept called pre-bunking. Now, this is the idea of training people to recognize bad information when they see it. And it's a different strategy from other techniques like fact-checking or community notes, because you're essentially training the audience in advance. So let's start with a real example. In early 2004, voters across the European Union were getting ready for parliamentary elections. Now, for my American listeners, in a parliamentary system, individuals get elected to a legislature, and whichever party gets the most people elected gets to pick the administrator, often called a prime minister. So every individual election for a representative can be pretty important, because you don't have to have a party get a majority of votes, you just have to get the most seats. So in a weighty election like this, like most elections in our era, there was a lot of social media traffic. You had direct social messages shared from political parties. You had users making their own comments. You had people making audacious claims about where Europe is going. And not all of this information was factual. Elections tend to generate a lot of disinformation. And once those false stories start spreading, they tend to go viral. But this time there was something different as well. In the run-up to the election, some users in countries like Germany, Poland, Belgium, and others, they had short animated videos inserted into their feeds. These were 50-second long explainers, and they were not promoting a candidate or were even talking about the issues, but instead they explained how misinformation works. So for example, one video showed how online content can use emotional language to make people mad, and that can shut down their ability to think critically. Another showed how you can take real images out of context and make them misleading. And these posts were instructional and they were simple. When you see things that are trying to outrage you or make claims without evidence, just take a beat, maybe look closer. This was not random public service announcements. It was part of a coordinated campaign that a team at Google called Jigsaw had created. And again, it was not fact-checking. It wasn't looking at specific rumors and saying if they were true or not. Instead, the goal was to teach people how to recognize that they could be manipulated before they saw that manipulation in their feeds. Millions of people saw these short lessons. And for the people who did, they got a mental checklist before they got the misinformation. That approach is called pre-bunking. And in today's study, researchers tried to figure out whether that kind of pre-bunking actually works. It's based on a simple idea. If you show people how misinformation works before they see it, they'll recognize it and be less likely to fall for it later. Now, you're probably familiar with the idea of debunking. This is where someone says something that's not true, and a fact checker will investigate it and will publish something corrective. Sometimes this happens from the person who created the original message if they made a mistake, but more often it's done by someone else. Sometimes it's done by the news media, and sometimes it's done by an independent fact-checking agency. There's an issue with debunking, though. Like I said, some of the techniques that they use for misinformation, particularly the emotionality of it, they tend to make those messages spread really quickly. So you can think of it this way. It takes a lot of time to do and publish a fact check. It takes almost no time to lie. So the misinformation gets ahead of the fact checks pretty quickly. And because debunking is done separately from the message itself, people don't always even see those debunking messages. And we already have pretty good research that shows that those first impressions stick around. If someone believes your message, a debunking message is going to have a hard time changing that perception. With pre-bunking, we maybe change the order. Instead of going after individual bits of misinformation, individual lies, you try to teach the audience the strategies behind that misinformation. So this can include things like being emotionally manipulative, framing something as a conspiracy, treating someone as an expert when they're not, or taking content out of context. And the goal is to help people recognize when someone is trying to mislead them. It's about the tactic, not the content. And the approach is rooted in something called inoculation theory. It's a psychological theory from the 60s. Sometimes we call a shot to prevent disease an inoculation, and this theory does borrow from medicine. Much the same way that a vaccine might give you a weakened version of a virus so that your immune system can recognize and repel it next time, a pre-bunking message is going to expose you to a weakened version of misinformation. And the hope is that you will develop mental resistance. There's been studies going back several years where researchers have tested pre-bunking in the lab and in controlled online experiments. And a lot of these do suggest that if people are taught how to find misinformation tactics, they are better at recognizing them. And this has some good effects. They may see information as less credible and less likely to want to spread bad fake news. There's an important question that stays, though. I said a controlled experiment. And in a controlled experiment, you're making sure that someone is going to see something and pay attention to it. But it's different if it works inside someone's social media feed. And this is where they're using social media, but they're not doing it while someone's watching them. So you can think about how you scroll on your phone, and maybe you're blitzing through things and you've got one eye on your phone and the other on your kids across the room. Everything's coming at you in a stream. So that's where this paper this week comes in. The paper's title is Pre-Bunking Misinformation Techniques in Social Media Feeds, Results from an Instagram Field Study. And you can find the paper for free online at the Harvard Kennedy School Misinformation Journal. I'll put a link in the show notes. Now, the reason this paper is important is because it wasn't a survey or a lab experiment. It happened in the natural world. Researchers created a 19-second video that taught people about emotional manipulation, which is when someone tries to scare you or make you angry to get you to believe something instead of just using facts. They used a fake silly headline as an example, yoga linked to terrifying full-body cancer. This obviously ridiculous headline was meant to show people how fear-based fake news works so that they could recognize it later when they were scrolling through their own feeds. They ran this video as an Instagram ad, just like any company could advertise a product. And the video appeared in Instagram stories for users in the UK between 18 and 34. In total, more than 300,000 people saw the ad campaign. And to be included, the people had to watch at least half of the 19-second video. So there were about 45,000 people who did this, and they were put on what the researchers called a watch list. Now here's where it gets tricky. The scientists wanted to compare people who watched the video to people who didn't to see if the video actually helped. Since Instagram doesn't let you randomly assign people to groups, like you can in a lab, they came up with a clever workaround. They used people's birth months to split them into groups. People born in April, July, and October were put in the control group, meaning they didn't see the educational video at all. The ad wasn't targeted at them. Everyone else who watched at least half the video was in the treatment group. After the people watched or didn't watch the video, both groups were shown a quiz in the Instagram Stories feed. The quiz showed them a fake headline and asked them to identify whether it was using emotional manipulation or something else. Instagram's quiz feature only allows 2 choices for answers, so it was a simple question with just 2 options. People took this quiz anywhere from 24 hours to 10 days after seeing or not seeing the video. So in total, 806 people answered the quiz, with about 403 from each group. Now, the results were really impressive. In the control group, which didn't see the educational video, only 38% of the people correctly identified that the headline was using emotional manipulation. That's actually worse than randomly guessing, which would be 50%. But the treatment group, which did watch the video, 59.55% got it right, and that's a difference of about 21 percentage points. Now, what's even more remarkable is that 5 months later, the researchers tested people again with the same quiz, although not necessarily the same individuals. They wanted to see if the effect lasted or wore off over time. This time they got 432 responses from the control group and 244 from the treatment group, and the results stayed almost the same. About 44% of the control group got it right, while about 66% of the treatment group did. It was still about 21 percentage points difference, meaning that the video's protective effect lasted for at least 5 months. The researchers also looked at whether the video made people curious to learn more. Underneath the quiz, there was a link people could click to read about the science behind inoculation against misinformation. And even though very few people clicked the link overall, because most people don't click on links while scrolling through social media, the treatment group clicked it 3 times more often than the control group. The treatment group had a click rate of 0.3%, while the control group only had 0.1%. And while these numbers sound tiny, they're actually meaningful because people rarely click on links in social media ads at all. 5 months later, people who had seen the video were still clicking the Learn More link more often than those who didn't. So the pre-bunking made a real difference. It didn't make all the difference, though. It didn't eliminate the persuasive power of the misinformation completely, and that matters. In the real world, audiences are continually making small judgments, and those judgments affect how fast misinformation can spread for everybody. So if you have a lower credibility rating or a lower chance of sharing, that can add up, but it's not a magic shield. So I guess I would say overall, pre-bunking is one tool in a toolbox of approaches that could be used against fake news. For a while, our major strategies against misinformation have been encouraging companies to change the algorithm, trying things like community notes, and after-the-fact debunking. And notice that those approaches really focus on the content itself. Do we need to label it? Do we need to take it down? Do we need to slow its spread? Is it even true? In some national contexts, this is not going to work well. When you have a country that is very focused on freedom of speech, that does include the freedom to lie. And that means that social, corporate, or community efforts to fix the problem are unlikely to work. But pre-bunking is different. It shifts the responsibility onto the users, the audience, to me and to you. So instead of trying to catch every misleading post, it tries to strengthen the person who is scrolling through the feed. And it does not affect the right of people to speak, but it affects the ability of others to listen. And in an age where lies are a lot easier and cheaper to create than fact checks are, this is probably a solution we need. Another nice function of pre-bunking is that it's apolitical. You don't have to have an opinion one way or the other to know if you're being manipulated. And in a highly polarized environment, which we're finding in a lot of the world right now, that's pretty important. At the same time, the study does have some limits. It was really nice that they saw that the effect lasted for a long period, but we don't know if it would last even longer than that. It could be that those pre-bunking messages need to be repeated, and that creates its own problems with message fatigue for the users. Just as there are organizations and campaigns to create misinformation, we probably need the similar for pre-bunking, and that is not as well tested. What I find most interesting about pre-bunking, though, is that it changes someone's mindset from reactive to proactive. It treats misinformation less like a series of isolated lies and more like a strategy that we can combat with another strategy. And so that raises another question for me. Might we, all of us truth seekers, have a role in this? Do pre-bunkers need to be nonprofits or research teams or experts, or could we do this for each other? I think all of us have probably taken the role of fact checker at some time, and it's a role we pretty commonly run into. We see something in a comments section and we comment back. Or we see a friend share something on social media that you know is not true, and maybe you share somebody's fact check to let them know that it was wrong. And that's great. But perhaps we could share pre-bunking information. Instead of saying this is wrong, you can say, this seems like it's just designed to make you mad. Or maybe you can say, do we know that this person is actually a doctor / scientist / soldier or whatever? When you respond in that way, it's not like you're given a whole big lecture in media literacy, and you're not going to create that knee-jerk reaction from saying someone's wrong. It's just a little nudge. But it does name the technique, and that might help make the strategy visible for more people. And if enough people do this in their own networks, Pre-bunking can get bigger than just official campaigns, and it might eventually become a social norm. It would become something that everybody does for everybody else. Peer-to-peer pre-bunking is an open research question, but this study suggests that it is a question worth asking. Would people understand the tactics their judgments sometimes shift? And that means that the skill of pre-bunking in itself matters. And it may be that it matters for me and you. So that's the work ahead. So, truth seekers, thank you for joining me for this episode of the Unspun Journal Club. If there's a paper you have that you'd like me to cover, please reach out at Dr. Sturgill on Instagram or at Dr. Sturge, DRSTURG, on Blue Sky or X. Stay sharp, everyone. Thanks for getting Unspun with me this week. Unspun is a production of me, Amanda Sturgill, and is a proud member of the MSW Media family of podcasts. Send me your thoughts and ideas about trickery in the news on Gmail at theunspunpodcast@gmail.com. I even write back. And find this episode's show notes and more information at theunspunpodcast.substack.com. Want to learn more and get smarter? Check out my book, Detecting Deception: Tools to Fight Fake News, which is available on Amazon or your favorite online bookseller. And until next time, stay sharp, everyone.
Hi, I'm Frances Callier.
And I'm Angela V. Shelton.
And we're Frangela.
You know what you need in your life? The Final Word podcast.
Yes, you do.
That's right. It is the final word on all things political and pop cultural.
Where we make real news real funny.
Where we inspire you so you can #resist.
Subscribe and get a new episode of the Final Word podcast each week. It's the news we think you need to hear.
That's right. We think you need to hear it. Okay?
Yeah, it's what we say so.
That's right. And because all we do is give, every Thursday you can listen to our hysterical podcast, Idiot of the Week.
We round up the stupid because you know what? Somebody has to.
Okay. All we do is give.
Tired of sugar-coated news and corporate spin? Check out The Nicole Sandler Show. Speaking truth to power with the irreverence it deserves. Smart, fearless, and just the right amount of snark. Nicole breaks down the headlines, exposes the hypocrisy, and talks with the people working for real change. Weekdays at 3 Eastern, noon Pacific on Progressive Voices, NicoleSandler.com, Substack, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't just get the news, get the truth.